He left me the day I got my diagnosis. Then he came back smiling. My husband vowed to love me in sickness and in health. When I got sick, really sick, he was gone in 3 days. I survived alone. Then he knocked on my door with flowers. My name is Claire. And I need to start with the moment everything changed. Not the day I got sick, but the day I realized I was stronger than the person I had chosen to love. Daniel and I met in college. He was charming in that easy, effortless way that makes you feel chosen just by being near him. We dated for 3 years, got engaged at 26, married at 28. The wedding was beautiful. Outdoor ceremony, September light, white roses everywhere. He said the vows clearly, confidently, in sickness and in health. I remember thinking, of course. Of course he means that. We all mean that. The symptoms started about a year into our marriage. Fatigue that no amount of sleep could fix. Joint pain that moved around my body like it couldn't decide where to settle. A rash across my cheeks that my regular doctor initially dismissed as rosacea. It took 7 months, 4 specialists, and one particularly persistent rheumatologist to finally get the answer. Lupus. Systemic lupus erythematosus, a chronic autoimmune disease where the immune system attacks the body's own tissue. Unpredictable, manageable for some, devastating for others. My case was not the mild kind. I remember sitting in the car after that appointment, Daniel in the driver's seat, the diagnosis paperwork in my lap. I was scared, but I also felt something close to relief, finally having a name for what had been stealing pieces of me for months. I reached over and took his hand. He didn't squeeze back. The next 3 days were quiet in a way that had texture to it. Daniel was present physically, but somewhere else entirely. He made phone calls in the other room. He slept facing away from me. He stopped asking how I was feeling. On the 3rd day, I came home from a follow-up appointment to find his closet half empty. He was sitting at the kitchen table with a bag by his feet. "I can't do this, Claire," he said. "I'm sorry, I'm not built for this." I stood in the doorway still wearing my coat. "You're leaving. I think it's better for both of us if—" "You're leaving," I said again. Not a question this time. He left within the hour. I won't romanticize what came next. It was the hardest period of my life, and I want to be honest about that. Managing lupus alone is brutal. The medication regimen, the flares, the specialist appointments, the insurance battles, the days when getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain with no gear. I had to leave my full-time job and switch to part-time remote work. I moved into a smaller apartment. I learned very quickly who in my life was actually there and who had only been there for the easy version of me. My sister drove 4 hours every other weekend for 8 months straight. My friend Priya researched my medication options more thoroughly than I did. My neighbor Ruth, a 68-year-old retired nurse who I barely knew, started leaving food outside my door on bad weeks without ever making it a big deal. These people saved my life in ways that have nothing to do with medicine. Daniel, meanwhile, had moved in with a woman named Ashley. I know because we had mutual friends who eventually stopped pretending they didn't know. It took 2 years. 2 years of treatment adjustments, dietary changes, stress management, and what my rheumatologist called, carefully, professionally, a remarkable response to the protocol. My inflammation markers dropped. My flares became less frequent and less severe. I rebuilt my stamina slowly, the way you rebuild anything that's been seriously damaged, one careful layer at a time. I won't say I'm cured. Lupus doesn't work that way. But I crossed a threshold that not everyone with my presentation crosses, and my doctors were genuinely surprised. I celebrated by taking myself to dinner alone at a nice restaurant, ordering whatever I wanted, and sitting with the quiet fact that I had done something hard, and I had done it without the person who promised he would be there. That dinner tasted incredible. He called on a Thursday evening, 14 months after my last contact with him. I almost didn't pick up. I stared at his name on the screen for a long time. I picked up. His voice was the same. That same easy, warm cadence that had once made me feel chosen. He said he'd heard I was doing better. He said he'd been thinking about me. He said, and I want to quote this exactly because I have replayed it many times, "I made the biggest mistake of my life, Claire. I was a coward. I know that. I just need you to know that I know that." I didn't say anything. "I'd like to see you," he said, "if you'd let me, just to talk." He showed up on a Saturday morning with flowers. Peonies, my favorite. He remembered. He looked good. Tanned, well-rested. The kind of man who had clearly not spent the last 2 years learning what it felt like to fight for his own life. I let him in. I made coffee. I sat across from him at my kitchen table, the same kitchen table where I had eaten alone through countless bad weeks, and I listened to everything he had to say. He was sorry. He had been scared. He had been selfish. Ashley was gone. He had done therapy. He understood now what he had done. He wanted to try again. He believed we could find our way back. He talked for a long time. When he finished, I wrapped both hands around my coffee mug, and I thought about the woman who had stood in a doorway in her coat and watched him pick up a bag and choose himself over her. Then I thought about the woman sitting here now. They were not the same person. Daniel, I said, I believe that you're sorry. I actually do. And I believe that you've done some real work on yourself, and that's genuinely good. For you, for whoever comes next in your life. He started to speak. I kept going. But I need you to understand something. The person you're asking to come back to, she doesn't exist anymore. I rebuilt myself without you, completely. And the woman I became in that process doesn't have space in her life for someone who left when leaving was the easiest option. Claire, I forgive you, I said. I mean that sincerely, but forgiveness isn't a door. It doesn't mean come in. He sat with that for a moment. Then he nodded. Slowly, he picked up his jacket. He paused at the door. You seem really good, he said quietly. And I could tell he meant it. And I could also tell it cost him something to say it. I am, I said. I really am. I kept the peonies, put them in a vase on the windowsill. They were beautiful. No reason to let them go to waste. I think about that version of me sometimes. The woman standing in a doorway, still in her coat, watching her husband leave with a bag. I don't feel sorry for her anymore. I feel something closer to respect. She had no idea what was coming. She had no roadmap, no backup plan, no guarantee that she was going to be okay. She just kept going anyway. That's the whole story, really. Not the husband who left, not the husband who came back. Just a woman who kept going. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself after someone chose to walk away, leave a comment below. You are not alone. Subscribe for new stories every week. And remember, some people leave your life to make room for the version of you that never needed them. New stories drop every single day. If you don't want to miss them, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Takes 2 seconds, means everything.